Good evening, everyone. My name is John Burns, and I'm so happy to host this cultural conversation tonight on the topic of answering the burning questions, what parents, students, and educators need to know about vaping and tobacco use. Before we jump into the program, I really want to launch tonight's conversation with an opening video that really provides the framework for around the conversation that we'll be having this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into the opening video, and then we'll get the program started.
Tobacco companies hook our kids with flavored e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes are sleek and easy to hide. So if your kid is vaping, it may be hard to spot, but the health risks are impossible to ignore. Nicotine is highly addictive and can harm developing brains, impacting your kids' attention, learning, and mood, in the classroom and at home. Students should be going back to school, not back to addiction. We must stop tobacco companies from targeting our kids.
Well, again, good evening, everyone. My name is John Burns. I'm the managing partner at the Burns Brothers, and I am so honored to be moderating today's conversation for a series that the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids launched called Campaign for the Culture. And this is really about engaging, building awareness, mobilizing communities of color around tobacco control issues, and really fighting back against big tobacco. And this is the third in a series of cultural conversations that we've had around some of these very, very, very important topics. And again, today's theme is answering the burning questions, what parents, students, and educators need to know about vaping and tobacco use. And we have an incredible, dynamic, just really thought-provoking group of speakers that we will be bringing to you this evening. We will have two panel discussions that will be incredibly enlightening and very, very impactful. But before we get started with the panel discussions, I'd like to bring to the stage the brains behind this incredible campaign, our fearless leader at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, Miss Portia Reddick-White. She is the VP of Strategic Partnerships at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. Welcome, Portia.
Thank you, John. So good to be with you tonight for our third conversation in this series. Really excited to answer some of these burning questions so that everybody wants to hear about.
Yeah, no, well, Portia, so first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership. I know the organization is so thankful for your leadership. And I know when we've had these prior conversations, we really begin to learn so many important critical information that we need to know, and then also how to mobilize and do what we can in our own communities, really push for change. With that being said, we know school is upon us and young people are going back to school. And we know there's some immediate concerns that parents have across this country around tobacco use, around vaping, and amongst other things. And so just want to talk to you about what TFK is doing in kind of the education space. You all work on a daily basis to advocate around tobacco control issues. But talk to us about kind of what you're doing on a daily basis as an organization to really fight and advocate for young people.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So, our number one focus is to just eradicate this whole use of tobacco. It is the number one killer of preventable death. And because of that, it's our mission and it's our goal to do our best in making an impact to change the dynamics there. And so with that in mind, we know right now with the COVID epidemic and folks headed back to school wearing masks. I've got a youth too who's going to be doing that. It's still a thing. It's still something that we care about, and we're really concerned about the possibility of these growing numbers of more youth using these tobacco products. So we're going to do our best to answer some of these questions tonight that parents have, that youth have. That folks in the industry have, the healthcare industry, and answering some of those questions and really helping each other as we learn together. Also, educators, they play a huge part in this discussion.
Mm-hmm. No, Portia, I couldn't agree with you more. And we think about kind of as young people go back to school and vaping and e-cigarettes and just generally speaking, one of the biggest tactics that big tobacco uses is flavors. So
Yeah.
talk to me about the organization, what you're doing on a daily basis to really educate young people, educate parents around flavors and the impact that really plays in young people picking up tobacco.
So I'm glad you asked that question, because really right before or during this whole series, as people were signing up, we asked folks to share their questions. And by the way, there is a question that we can answer that will help to answer your question. It was a question from Danitha in California, and she really wanted to know, well, what entices kids to use tobacco products? So I guess I can answer that with also some of the information that you've asked for as well. So the cause of the problem really is clear. It's flavors, because tobacco companies lure kids with these appealing flavors like cotton candy, bubblegum, gummy bear, menthol, and flavors play a very major role in youth becoming addicted to e-cigarettes as well as other tobacco products. And basically, it's because they mask the taste of tobacco. It makes it easier for new users to initiate and use. And so right now, we've got 81% of youth who have the 81% of youth who have ever used tobacco products. They initiated this use with a flavored product. So it's huge, right? It's attractive. 72.3% of youth tobacco users have used a flavored tobacco product. Guess what? In the past month. And at least 2/3 of youth tobacco users report using tobacco products basically because they like it, because it comes in flavors that they like. So there are over 15,000 e-cigarette flavors. And the most recent youth tobacco survey found that an increasing proportion of youth e-cigarette users reported using flavored products. That was in 2020. It was 82.9%. In 2019, that same percentage was 68.8%. So that's a good growth right there, right? So right now, nearly 3 million youth use flavored e-cigarettes. The flavors hide the fact that e-cigarettes can deliver these massive doses of nicotine, which is very addictive. It's an addictive drug. And many e-cigarettes like Juul contain as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. Cigarettes are bad. So e-cigarettes are just as bad, and they can addict kids very quickly and lead to severe symptoms of addiction and withdrawal. And so these flavors entice kids, and the nicotine addicts kids. So yes, that is why we're having this discussion, because we want to help inform youth as they are headed back to school, inform parents as they are giving to their kids going back, and educators who are doing the same, and health officials and health those who are in the health industry, to understand how we can together bind together to help this pandemic of e-cigarette use to be diminished, of course, but just tobacco use as a whole, whether that's combustible. So combustible, I know that's the cigarette, right? Or the non-combustible, the e-cigs.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you had some incredible, just unfortunate statistics. I will say that. Very, very unfortunate statistics to share. And one that really stuck out to me. Did you say 15,000 flavors?
Lots of flavors. 15,000, if you can imagine that. But yes, 15,000 flavors. So it comes in all of these, quote, yummy things that are like candy, right? Who wouldn't like cotton candy? I love it. My daughter loves it. But things like that, bubblegum, apple sour, you name it. It comes in those flavors. And one of the easiest flavors that kids get addicted to, which is in a cigarette form as well, is menthol. So we have to do our best to move these flavored products off the market.
Mm-hmm. No, Portia. And you bring up menthol, and that leads me to my final question before we jump into the panel conversation. That's around, big tobacco's kind of attack on marginalized communities. And we know it's a predatory practice that big tobacco's really been enlisting for generations. But talk a little bit about that attack on marginalized communities. I know specifically around menthol, that's really targeted African-American communities, but big tobacco is really targeting all communities, especially marginalized communities.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up too, John, because menthol has been the inroads, so to speak, from big tobacco into the African American, the Black community. We know that. We've seen that. We've seen the ads. We actually wanted to, bring forth some of this education within this Campaign for the Culture series. Have been focusing on the African American community, but that's not the only community that has been affected with this targeting by big tobacco. Big tobacco, as you have said, has really been affecting marginalized communities, continues to, prevail and to entice youth in these communities, specifically, but not just youth, but still they are really prevalent and pushing onward. So we are really trying to bring together, even in this conversation, allies to support the understanding that together we can ban and we can rid of big tobacco's focus and push and their whole effort, their whole marketing scheme. But it's going to take all of us to do it together. So with that, I'm looking forward to a good conversation. I don't want to spoil it. There's a lot that we can share, and I know that there's a lot that our panelists and our speakers are going to share. So I would say onward with the show.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Portia. As always, I enjoy learning and just getting incredible insights from you. So thank you for opening this conversation with me. And then to your point, we have some incredible allies that we will be hearing from shortly. And again, we are stronger together. We can fight big tobacco together. And so without further ado, thank you, Portia, and we will get on with our first conversation.
Perfect.
Thank you. So again, the importance of allyship, of working together, and what we're going to hear from now is some incredible speakers, incredible thought leaders, experts, advocates in the space. So I'd like to bring Meredith Berkman, co-founder, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, Andrew Brennan, board member at large, National Parent Teacher Association, Grace Plowman, Tobacco Free Kids Ambassador, Dr. Winston Price, past president of the National Medical Association, and Greg Witterick to the stage as well. And Greg is the past president, National Association of Secondary School Principals. Welcome, 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 everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I want to start with you, Meredith, and just talk to us about how can parents tell if their kids are vaping? Are there any signs? What should all the parents out there be looking for around just any signs of vaping?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that, remember, these products were created to be stealth. They're stealth by design. And so that's why you hear so much talk at the beginning of this epidemic that, parents and educators didn't realize kids would be charging what looked like a computer charger in their computer in the middle of class, and it was actually a way to charge their Juul pen. So you have to remember, a lot of these devices look like things you'd find on your kid's desk. But in terms of what you see from your child, things like, frequent excuses to go outside or go into the bathroom. You might smell a very light, sweet, faint scent on their clothes. They might have a very dry, raspy cough, or they might suddenly have a bloody nose, and you can get very dry mucous membranes from the use of these products, or mouth sores. You may see a change in sleep patterns and a change in mood and behavior. Now, I would argue, as a parent of four teens, or almost one of them is actually beyond that phase, but that sounds a lot like being a teenager. There's a lot going on in your life. So you really have to be thoughtful. Was this a sudden change? You really want to look out for behavior that you did not notice before. And you also want to be looking to see if you're finding odd looking marker caps or lots of extra chargers. Those could be signs that your kid might be using a vape pen, an e-cigarette.
No, Meredith. I think that's great insights, and for all the parents out there, I think that's valuable information to really understand. And I want to kind of move over to Grace. And Grace, you're a young person, really engaged in these issues. Talk to us about why you got involved in tobacco prevention and control.
Yeah, thank you. So I got involved my sophomore year of high school. I just graduated this year. I kind of started out with volunteer work through a nonprofit called the Association for Non-Smokers, Answer. I started to do tobacco compliance checks and other forms of volunteering, and then that kind of elevated to speaking at events and more political activism on that side as well. Speaking at city council meetings, trying to get flavor bans and other ordinances like that passed.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate all the great work that you're doing, and having young advocates like yourself on the ground on a daily basis, working with your peers and helping curb this incredibly harmful substance from entering young people's bodies is incredibly important. So thank you so much for that. Greg, I kind of want to pivot to you. When we think about educators, oftentimes we hear educators struggle with what to do when students are caught with vaping. What are some practices you have seen implemented in school to really assist kids who are using tobacco products? What have you seen that's been successful?
So one of the things that we've done, we have a drug counselor, and so any students that are what we suspect or that are caught taking drugs or alcohol or smoking, we refer them to that person, and they have to go in and meet with that person on a weekly basis, just talking about their issue. We also require them to get an assessment. So they go to an outside agency, get an assessment, and then their problem, wherever the level of their problem is shared with their parents. So we don't find out what their level of how serious their issue is, but we just get verification that that assessment took place. But it gives the parents kind of a place to start from of realizing how serious the problem is, and then they can give those parents some ideas of what to do. We've really tried to get away from some of the more serious consequences as best as possible. The one that we've not been able to get away from is the athletic suspensions, because it's such a serious part of our athletic code, and because it is tobacco products that they're consuming, that still happens. But we've tried to change some of the other consequences to be more consistent with understanding that this is an addiction. And quite often they come to us as freshmen and they're already addicted to the nicotine.
So yeah, that's actually Greg. That's an incredible question. I want to bring Dr. Price in, and we talk about when we talk about this addiction, and we're seeing, as Greg mentioned, this new generation becoming addicted on what we see as a daily basis, right? Because it started at such a young age. Because kids are no longer just experimenting; they're smoking on a regular basis, using vapes on a regular basis. What can we do? What are you seeing that's been, again, successful in helping kind of right some of these wrongs and curb some of this usage?
Thank you, and thank you for CTFK for inviting me. We're in a very stressful period in our society. We're being impacted by this pandemic, but the impact goes beyond the classroom. We know that in the setting of racism that is occurring in our society, youth between 11 and 23 are 80% more likely to smoke than youth who are not. And this is certainly smoking is turned to for stress relief and also for anxiety relief. And sometimes children use it as a means of rebelling against the parents. And with all the pressures that they felt from the pandemic, we've had an increase in the smoking that is occurring in the youth group. Mental health emergencies have increased by 24 to 31% during the pandemic. And so you can imagine the stress upon the kids, and you can also imagine the peer pressure that is occurring. I think the actions by the CDFK is among the kinds of things that we can do, and also educating parents and teachers about the harmful effects of tobacco, of nicotine, and the long-term effects. And one of the things that's not talked about a lot, but you can imagine that with COVID-19, you know that it causes a tremendous amount of damage to the lung. And so quiet as it kept, many of the children who may not have severe symptoms of COVID-19. We still don't know the long-term effects and damage to their lungs. And so the impact of vaping and combustible tobacco on those immature lungs can be tremendous and cause long-term problems and add to the morbidity and mortality. So we've got a long way to go in terms of using the resources of these prevention strategies to combat tobacco smoking in youth.
No, Dr. Price, I think you're spot on there. And I want to transition to Andrew and kind of bring you into the conversation. Andrew, you think about where parents go to as a first kind of resort. They go to the PTA, right? So what is the PTA doing to help parents address the youth e-cig epidemic?
Well, and I really appreciate the question, and thanks for having me today. The National PTA is working every day to try and solve the numerous problems that are facing families and parents, not only as they navigate the racial injustice our countries are facing and the COVID-19 pandemic, but also all the challenges that face young people. I want folks to know that if they go to pta.org/substance misuse, you'll find an entire webpage that we've put together to provide resources for parents and families who are looking for information, frankly, about what they can do to best support their child as they are going back to school and trying to avoid these e-cigarettes. I also want to share that we ourselves hosted a webinar earlier this year, which you'll be able to find on that webpage. And PTAs have been working across the country in support of legislation and of policies to help keep these 15,000 flavors out of the wrong hands. I do just want to underscore two things that were said earlier by Portia. I think she's completely right about the importance of getting information in people's hands. I find that young people, when they have information about what these e-cigarettes can do, they make more informed decisions. And also just what Dr. Price shared about mental health and the role that mental health can play in leading kids to e-cigarettes and other drugs. Mental health issues are worse with virtual learning. We know that. And so it's all the more important that we both support kids with the information that they have and also keep them in school to help support their mental health as well.
No, Andrew, you hit on so many very critical points. So thank you for that commentary. I think it's incredibly valuable. And we think about the youth voice. I want to bring Grace back to the conversation. And you're, again, on the ground doing the work. And we all know, and for folks that don't know, that Grace started a club in high school. What was the initial reaction of some of your peers? And talk maybe about the club and how it was received and kind of what you were doing with that club as well.
Yeah, so club at my school wasn't solely started by me. It was kind of a group effort of like-minded kids that wanted to help spread the message to our peers that there are very serious health risks associated with this. One of the main focuses of our club was more so to put out resources for anti-addiction and anti-picking up in the first place, really just prevention in general.
Grace, I think we might be losing you, Grace, but we'll definitely come back to you because I know we want to hear more about the club. As we wait for Grace to kind of come back on, Greg, I want to pivot back to you. And one of the things I mentioned when Portia was speaking in the opening was she mentioned 15,000 flavors, and that's still so astonishing to me as a number. So what are you seeing in schools? What types of products do you see kids really using in schools? And what kind of role do you think flavors play in really hooking kids to tobacco products?
So what we found a number of years ago, and when this first started happening, we had a lot of freshmen that were coming in, and they were already using it. I have this box of like hundreds of different devices that I've over the last 3 or 4 years that we've confiscated, and some of them they're very small. The thing about the vaping device is that you can take a puff off it and then put it right back in your pocket. Obviously, you can't do that with a cigarette without burning your pants, right? But with these, you can. So they're very small. They look like they look like flash drives. I have one it looks exactly like, if I showed it to you, you would all think it is a highlighter. It's lime green. You think it's a highlighter, it's a vaping device. Could have that, a kid could have that sitting on their desk at school, and the teacher would not know at all what that was. So they make these devices for the purpose of concealment. And then the flavor piece is, and that's the part that is really very frustrating, because it's quite obvious that these companies are marketing it to the young people to get them hooked so that they have these clients for many, many years. A person who, a sixth grader is probably not going to be doing it if it just tastes like tobacco. It doesn't taste good, right? But if I can mask that flavor and make it taste like cotton candy or menthol or gummy bears, well, that's going to be very attractive, and so that's what hooks them. So I think we talk about the hook, and then it's the nicotine that keeps them coming, right? So they get addicted to the nicotine, and then it keeps them coming. So absolutely, the flavors are in my mind, is the number one reason why you have such a huge number of young people, middle school kids especially, or mostly in my mind, who are starting, and how they get initiated in this is through the flavors.
No, Greg, thank you for sharing that. And Grace, I want to definitely come back to you, but I want to just jump to Dr. Price really quick. I know Greg mentioned the flavors, and I know Portia in her opening too talked about the predatory practice of big tobacco specific to African-American communities and menthol. Dr. Price, talk to me about menthol specifically, and why it's easier for people to become addicted to tobacco if they start with menthol products.
Right. So essentially, boil it down. Menthol is anesthetic. It causes a numbing of sensation to allow the harmful and distasteful parts of tobacco and e-cigarette vapors to be inhaled in the lungs. So if you don't feel the negative effect of that, you're likely to inhale more, and of course, get more nicotine into your system. And nicotine is bad. It damages the brain in young children and adolescents. It has harmful effects in terms of the brain, the heart, lung tissue. And there are even studies that are looking at, because nicotine can stimulate new blood vessels for individuals as they age and develop malignancies or tumors or cancer, it allows for the growth of those tumors. And then there's a substance called diacetyl in e-cigarettes. You may have heard the term popcorn lung that we need to make more parents and teachers aware of. And this causes a permanent damage to the lung. Now you can imagine we're in a pandemic. We don't need people to have compromised lungs as they're trying to fight off COVID-19. But unfortunately, I think we're in a phase right now as kids go back to school, continue to smoke and vape, that we're going to see more damaging effects of COVID-19. So we've got to allow this campaign to reduce the use of tobacco flavors, nicotine, to addict kids to use the product, and try to recover some of that money for education, for the long-term effects, because this is a long-standing, lifelong battle for 480,000 deaths per year. And if we don't do something to reduce the use of tobacco products in our youth, we're going to lose a significant number of children under 18 who are going to shorten their lifespan.
No, Dr. Price, and that's a great point. And to your point, you said if we don't do something, I guess, with a sense of urgency, we're going to continue to lose life. So I want to transition back to Meredith and talk about how the FDA can act with a sense of urgency, right, Meredith? And the FDA has an opportunity to really clear the market of flavored e-cigarettes by September 9th. I want you to kind of talk to folks who might not know about what's at stake on September 9th, and then also talk about why it's so important for the FDA to reject all flavored e-cigarettes, especially menthol cigarettes or e-cigarettes.
Sure. I'll just say very quickly, I mean, I think I haven't stopped nodding because every single person who's spoken, I mean, we're all on the same page. We're all partners in this fight. And one of the most devastating things to think about is that this is a generation of young people who, but for the the entrance of Juul and all the other bad actor, predatory e-cigarette companies that have followed and big tobacco flooding in, this is a generation of kids that would otherwise not have been initiated into tobacco use because so much important work had been done by medical professionals and public health groups, including the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and so many people on this call, that the youth smoking rate was the lowest it had ever been before Juul came on the market. So this was avoidable. And there is an enormous sense of urgency, as the doctor just said. It's never been more important to protect our kids' developing lungs. And so on September 9th, the FDA finally, under federal court order and after inexplicably years of delay, is supposed to answer the millions of applications that have been submitted by companies, tobacco companies and vaping companies that have been allowed to remain on the market with these products without full regulation since 2016. So Juul came on the market late 2015, early 2016. And there was no full FDA regulation for all of this time. And finally, again, under court order, thanks in part to the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and other litigants, the judge said that they would have to rule on these applications that the companies have to file last year on whether or not these products would be for the benefit of public health. Now, I don't think there's anybody on this call who would, if you're asked, are these products benefiting public health? These flavored products have initiated an entire generation of kids into tobacco use. And so what we all are urging FDA to do is the only thing that we believe can stop the continuation of this youth vaping epidemic and give us time to help all of these millions of addicted kids. And that is to deny Juul's application for a menthol Juul for so many of the reasons that the doctor explained why menthol is so harmful in addicting people to tobacco use, and all the flavored products that are applying to be on the market. And we've launched a Back to School, Not Back to Juul campaign. If you go on our website, parentsagainstVaping.org, you'll find it. And it gives, I think, several thousand people have already gone through our website to send a letter directly to FDA and to the HHS, Health and Human Services Secretary, and say, don't approve a menthol Juul, don't approve any flavored products. We must protect our kids from the predatory behavior of big tobacco and the vaping epidemic. No,
Meredith, thank you. I think understanding the role of the FDA and what's at stake on September 9th and is critically important. So thank you for kind of that oversight and that understanding that we all really, really need. And I want to transition back to Andrew, and then I want to close out with Grace. I want to hear more about your club. But Andrew, just before we close this segment and move on to the next, what is the general impression amongst young people about e-cigs? Do they think that they're safer than regular cigarettes? And I just have some young kids in my family, and there's so much confusion around what e-cigarettes do and their health implications. So kind of shed some light on that for us. What's that general impression?
Well, I think what it's important to remember is that young people, like all of us, including parents, have spent the last year and a half learning so much about respiratory illnesses, about what it means to be healthy in our communities. And so they already have an idea that the lungs are important, and they're looking out for ways to protect their health. I've seen young people advocating, for example, masks to help keep them in school. And so what we need to make sure that we're doing is providing the information to young people that one Juul pod is not equal to one cigarette. We're talking about a whole pack of cigarettes worth of nicotine in these Juul pods. And when they understand that these companies are targeting young Black and brown kids all over this country, targeting our health, I think that's the kind of information that helps kids make really informed decisions about whether or not to use these products. We have to trust them and as well as support them.
Mm-hmm. No, Andrew, and I think it starts also not only with us on this line and all the great advocates, but also starts with the young people like Grace on the ground and on the really in the schools doing what she's doing, starting these clubs. And no, Grace, when you were telling us about your club in high school, just want to, and you kind of got broken off there, so I want to make sure we hear all the amazing advocacy work that you're doing and can kind of just shed some light on why you started the club with your friends and what was your peers' initial reaction, and then talk just generally about what you're doing with the club.
Yeah, thank you. One of the big things that we really wanted to focus on, again, was providing resources for kids who would like to quit, because right now a lot of reactions from teens my age are that it's very hard to go to an adult because sometimes you're afraid that their immediate reaction will be anger or disappointment. But it's really important to kind of empathize and help to fight addiction rather than to punish for that addiction, if that makes sense. That was something that was really important to us, as well as the banning of flavors, because the flavors are really what are enticing kids my age. I mean, there aren't many 50-year-olds smoking like blueberry vapes. It's really targeted towards children and teens. And we just felt that it was very important to go to the cities that we were in, such as Mounds View, which is where my high school was, or Shoreview, where a lot of kids at the high school live, to make sure that those flavored products aren't being sold around the cities that we are living in, so that it's harder to gain access to those products. And it's harder to start in the first place because most kids do not start with like the regular tobacco flavored cigarettes. It's usually with something more palatable like menthol or the flavored e-cigarettes, because they're a lot easier to digest and the flavor isn't so harsh.
No, well, Grace, thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dr. Price. We really appreciate all the incredible insights. This was a great first conversation to the evening. I will let you all go, but thank you so much. We appreciate all the advocacy and all the work that you're doing to fight big tobacco. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, thank you. At this juncture, before we transition into our next panel conversation, I'd like to actually introduce another video as we begin to frame all the great work of all the great speakers, but really also put a framework around the next conversation. So next video, please.
You're home with your kids. What could they really get into? If big tobacco has their way, nicotine addiction. Today, millions of kids use flavored e-cigarettes. More get addicted every day. Big tobacco targets our kids with flavored e-cigarettes like cotton candy, bubble gum, and menthol, addictive products that harm developing brains. It's time to eliminate flavored e-cigarettes and protect our kids. The time is now. Stop big tobacco from...
Chief Executive Officer at the YWCA, Sebastian Suarez, a youth activist, and Amy Taylor, Chief of Community and Youth Engagement at the Truth Initiative. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us. I think that first conversation was incredibly enlightening, incredibly informational, but obviously also shared some very alarming stats, right, about just these tobacco issues and things that parents really need to be focused on. I want to start with you, Linda. As we think about COVID, and unfortunately, with this Delta variant and everything that's going on right now, we all know that COVID is a very, very real concern as kids return to school in the fall. What are some things that we have learned about COVID-19 and tobacco use that students, parents, and educators should know about?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a concern as we move back into the new school year. And with the resurgence of COVID-19, it really does heighten that concern about preventing kids from smoking and vaping. So the coronavirus, as we know, attacks the lungs and behaviors that harm the lungs that really can put individuals at a greater risk. So the CDC actually has found that smoking does increase the risk of severe illness from COVID-19. And there's also some growing evidence that vaping can harm lung health as well. And so it does make common sense as well that here we are in the midst of a pandemic, that it would not be a good time for kids to be passing around e-cigarettes, right? We have a virus and germs, and so passing that around is not a smart move. So for all these reasons, really, we should be doing everything that we can, to prevent kids from smoking and vaping and really to help smokers quit. So there truly has never been really a more important time to keep our lungs healthy during the, especially during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Linda, I think you brought up a great point. Like, how do we help, young people? How do we help everybody quit? And I want to definitely kind of pivot to Amy here over at Truth Initiative, because I know you're doing so many great things around that very, very issue. What resources do you have for parents and teachers to help prevent kids from vaping? And if they are vaping, and how do we really help them quit?
Sure, John. Thank you so much for this question. And I'm incredibly excited to share two resources that we have for all of you. The first is a school-based curriculum that is appropriate for middle school and high school students. It's called Vaping, Know the Truth. And you can get access to this curriculum at our website, which is truthinitiative.com/curriculum. And it's a free curriculum. So call your principal, call your superintendent, call your counselors. It is an evidence-based curriculum that we know that works. And why it works is because the curriculum is really first, it's digital, right? So that young people can use it from their computers, from their iPads, from their phones as well. So they can get access to it, and it's free. And the second piece is that it really is in the youth voice. We know that when young people talk to young people, it's a better way to share the facts. And that's what we do at Truth Initiative. We believe that we are contributors with young people. And so it is a 45-minute curriculum that really shares the facts about what the industry has done to target priority populations. It talks about the history of tobacco. It talks about resources that are available for young people to quit. And it also talks about mental health issues that young people are facing today. So instead of hitting their jewel, they're offered other options for them to deal with their mental health. The second tool that we have for parents and for young people is called This Is Quitting. And if you text Ditch Vape to 88709, you are enrolled into a text-based program that uses messaging specifically for teenagers and specifically for young adults, as well as parents, to help them quit vaping. And recently, we had our study published in the Journal of Medicine, saying that it is for those young people who are a part of this program are 40% more likely to quit vaping. And it's interesting because what we're hearing from young people is that they can't put their vapes down, right? And so we believe that we have two great resources that are available to you today to help solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. No, Amy, I hope folks were taking notes. Just can you say that where to text to again one more time?
Sure. For young people who are struggling with vaping and for parents who just want to be a part of the program, they should text Ditch Vape to 88709.
Okay, wonderful. No, thank you, Amy. I think that's valuable, and make sure folks got that. Just wanted to say it one more time. So thank you. And I want to just transition to Sebastian and then to Alicia. Sebastian, as a youth speaker and kind of advocate, how do you see tobacco industries targeting the Black, LGBTQ, Latino, and other communities today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I can sum it up in 2 points. The big tobacco industry is targeting these marginalized communities through increasing availability and ease of access for flavored tobacco products, and furthermore, increasing their use of predatory marketing tactics in neighborhoods with a high concentration of marginalized communities. An example I can give for that is that Black communities tend to be targeted more heavily with menthol cigarettes. In fact, it's a disproportionate amount. Furthermore, a study by the Truth Initiative showed that in Washington, D.C., Black neighborhoods were over 3 times more likely to have exterior tobacco advertising than in other communities. Another example I can provide is from the Beyond Demographics study that I'm working on. In this study, we found that big tobacco industries are targeting Latino communities by using advertisements that feature celebrities and calls and responses to Latino culture to try to entice youth to start using their products. Furthermore, we've seen that these big tobacco industries target LGBTQ communities as well. We've seen examples such as blue e-cigarette advertisements featuring drag performers to appeal to youth in the community. So these big tobacco industries are using these predatory tactics to try to convince youth in these marginalized populations to start utilizing their products.
No, Sebastian, you're 1000% correct, unfortunately. And I want to just kind of bring Alicia into this conversation. Alicia, the CDC has said that racism is a serious public health threat. And Sebastian mentioned the predatory practices of big tobacco specific to communities of color and the menthol with respect to African-American communities. Can you speak a little bit about that targeting, and why the YWCA sees tobacco use as a social justice issue?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having us tonight. YWCA has been around for 163 years, and we long recognize that supporting women's health and safety is central to our mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. And that's why we have had YWCA programs throughout several associations within states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Massachusetts around the cessation with tobacco. And YWCA also recognized that those programs were not enough, particularly as we saw the campaign's A Lifetime of Damage report. And I encourage you all, if you've not yet seen A Lifetime of Damage report, to check that report out. I mean, my jaw literally dropped when I saw on the black and white pages the statistics in that report about how the tobacco industry was unapologetically and intentionally targeting women and girls of color, and the devastating health impact that it has on those same women and girls of color. And with that, we knew that we had to move beyond the cessation programs that we had in the communities that I mentioned earlier in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Massachusetts, to do something that was more impactful, to share the devastating impact that continuing the use of tobacco had on the communities that we serve. Anytime that a corporate interest continues to harm women, girls, particularly women and girls of color, it is a social justice issue. It is a public health issue. And that means that it is a YWCA issue. And I am so happy and I am so proud of the partnership that we are building with the campaign that will continue to get towards our mission, which is eliminating racism and empowering women to uproot the systemic inequities, including how the tobacco company continues to target young girls and women of color with the use of tobacco. We're going to do this through advocacy, but we can't wait for advocacy and policy to continue to change what happens in our community. We're going to use our grassroots arm within our organization to go deep within our communities to make sure that we get the change that we need for the girls and women that we serve.
No. Alicia, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And you touched on some really critical points. And I think around the systemic structures that are employed, the predatory practice of big tobacco, and obviously in how it is a social justice issue. And we think about it from a social justice lens too. I think it's also important to kind of bring in the mental health components of what that looks like. And so Linda, I want to transition back to you. When you think about our kids going back to school, one of the issues that we see and that's actually been widely publicized lately is the impacts on mental health, right? So talk to me and talk to us about the intersections of mental health and tobacco use. And then also, what concerns do you have about these two issues as kids return to school in person?
Right. So, I think mental health is at the forefront. I've heard it several times this evening, correct? With the first panel that we listened to. So it is a concern. I think this pandemic has also really heightened that. mental health issues. I think we all are, dealing with this challenge of living in this pandemic. So it's a concern as we return to school. Students some of them have not been back in school for maybe 18 months. It just depends, where they're living and what their school setting was like last school year. So they're returning to an environment that they're going to be seeing their peers again, using perhaps e-cigarettes, and they could, feel those peer pressures around, as trying to get, their friends, if you will, to engage in the e-cigarettes. Our e-cigarettes are at an epidemic level. It's a huge problem, and so it's really important that we really have the mental health issues on our radar, because anxiety issues, depression, all of those mental health issues can lead to substance use, such as, e-cigarettes. And so it's important for parents and educators to really know the signs and be able to recognize that and bring it to the forefront. I think communication is really important. School nurses are a trusted member in the school community. And so they, many times students do come to them. They have good relationships with families. So I think it's important for parents to utilize the school nurse to communicate any concerns, and vice versa, that the school communicates to the parents.
Mm-hmm. No, Linda, thank you. Thank you for sharing that too. I think when you think about kids going back to school, Amy, what are you hearing on the ground, the Truth Initiative? What are you hearing? Obviously, kids have been out of school in person for so long. What are some of the concerns? What are you hearing?
So I think Linda just hit the nail on the head. From what we're hearing from young people is that they are struggling. There's so much stress, anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen when they go back to school. They're wearing masks. Sometimes they're not wearing masks and maybe want to be. And so what we're hearing is from young people who are vaping, they're turning to it because they think that it's going to help them with their mental health, right? Because it may feel good initially. But what we know and what they learn very quickly is that it negatively impacts their mental health, and it heightens depression and anxiety and stress. And what we're hearing from young people is once they start vaping is that they can't put their Juul down. They can't put their e-cigarette down because they have become addicted, and it happens so quickly. And so we are going to be spending a lot of time talking about other options for young people besides vaping that can help with their mental health, because I have 3 teenagers in my house right now, and this is all we talk about, right? And I think Meredith said this well earlier, is that there isn't the stigma around vaping like there is around combustible cigarettes, right? And so young people do think that it's safer than smoking combustible cigarettes. And so they're turning to it because they don't think it's dangerous. And that's why I'm so thankful, John, for you and for Portia and what you're doing to get the message out. And one of the things that we have done, if you go to thetruth.com, is really lift up young people's stories. We just ran a campaign called Quit Together about the real struggles that young people are facing. And we believe that when young people talk to young people, it changes hearts and minds. And it's so important that young people hear their stories from other young people. So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Well, no, thank you all for what you're doing. I'm just here as a conduit to kind of help share some of this message, but I think it's incredibly impactful, all the work that you're doing. You're really saving lives on a daily basis, so that cannot be understated. I want to just transition back to Alicia, and then ultimately let Sebastian kind of share some final thoughts as we close this segment. Alicia, we think about, again, young people going back to school, and we think also about how specifically targeted as big tobacco is in communities of color. Talk about how do we combat some of these tactics by big tobacco?
Yeah, I want to just lift up some comments that both Linda and Amy touched on, and that is, being trusted members of the community. What we are most proud of with our partnership with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, as YWCA, as I mentioned, we have 45, we're in 45 states, including the District of Columbia. We are in over 1,200 communities. And one of the things, the values that we add as an organization is that we are a trusted brick and mortar member of so many communities. So what we are hoping to do with our partnership is to continue to raise awareness in the communities that we serve, which are those communities that big tobacco continue to attack. So by putting out accurate information into the communities, by shining the light on the intentional targeting, on the folks, the women and the girls within the communities, by putting the information in the hands of the community members that come into YWCA for services on a daily basis, that is something that we are really excited and we're gearing up to do as we move forward with our partnership with the campaign. Another thing that we're going to do in concert is, I mentioned policy, and we have to do it in concert because it's not one or the other. We have to do 2 things, 3 things, 4 things at the same time because this is an issue and we need to address it right now head on with all resources, is to get our voices collectively out there when we think about our policy agenda. Add this to our policy agenda. We have the attention of the CDC. Earlier this year, CDC joined us in declaring racism a public health crisis. There's no way that any of us can deny that this is part of the public health crisis. The attack on marginalized communities as it relates to big tobacco continuing to target marginalized women, women of color, girls of color to distribute their products. So get in policy that mirrors the actions that we will take on a grassroots level, getting the information into the hands of the young girls, getting the information into the hands of the parents as trusted members of their communities are 2 ways that we are looking forward to partnering with the campaign in the coming months.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Alicia, thank you so much again for all the work that you're doing at the YWCA. And then Sebastian, to you, just any final thoughts?
Yeah, so in the 8 years that I've been doing anti-tobacco advocacy, if there are any parents or students that are wondering how to get involved or what type of strategies that we've used in the past, I can speak from experience that some of the most beneficial concepts are just following 3 simple words: educate, engage, and empower. Education is the #1 key to combating big tobacco industry's predatory marketing tactics. They like to rely and prey on the fact that marginalized communities might not know that these products are harmful, and they like to saturate these communities with enormous and gross amounts of advertising to normalize these products within their communities. By educating people, educating youth, parents, and all stakeholders, especially those that are directly targeted by big tobacco, we can start creating a pushback and have people understand the dangers of these products and how they're being taken advantage of. From this point, we can start to engage people to actually advocate in their communities and empower people to share their voices, speak to their officials, and take action against big tobacco industries.
Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Educate, engage, and empower. Thank you. I think that's a great takeaway and a great way to conclude this panel. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Sebastian, very much. Really appreciate your time. And just before we conclude today's program, want to share one more video with you all, and then we will hear some final remarks from our fearless leader, Portia Reddick-White. Without further ado, our final video to again frame this conversation to tonight. Take it away from the video now.
Juul fooled us once with flavored e-cigarettes that caused an explosion in youth nicotine addiction. Now Juul wants the FDA's blessing to keep addictive menthol products on the market and hook even more kids. So FDA, for kids' sake, don't be Juuled again. We know flavored e-cigarettes put our kids at risk. Next time, it's shame on you. Get the facts at tobaccofreekids.org.
At this juncture, I would love to bring Portia Reddick-White to the stage again for closing remarks. Portia, take it away.
Thank you, John. So I want to thank the partner organizations. This has just been a phenomenal panel, and we've learned so much. So thank you to Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, Meredith Berkman, hearing how to detect usage, what type of behaviors parents should look out for, and hearing how the September 9th decision has the ability to answer the application of tobacco vaping companies to place products on the market. Thank you for saying all of that. And from the National Parent Teacher Association, PTA, Andrew Brennan, thank you for bringing to the conversation the fact of racial injustice that young people face and the intersectionality of tobacco use and where people can go to just gain help with this. From the National Association of School Nurses, President Linda Mendoza, who shared info from the CDC, the connection to the COVID pandemic on our health. Thank you for bringing up all of that, plus the mental health implications. And for our Tobacco Free Kids ambassador and youth activist, Grace Plowman, understanding that there is yet work to be done on the ground. Thank you for sharing how you have been doing that work and how youth can join to support and spread the message on the ills of tobacco use and addiction and how youth feel, as well as providing resources to quit. And Sebastian Suarez, sharing the impactful points on availability and how big tobacco is targeting in marginalized communities was huge for us tonight. The National Medical Association, past president Dr. Winston Price, thank you for sharing the health impacts and the mental health intersectionality, understanding that our brains, our hearts are directly affected with the nicotine that vapes and tobacco carry. We got to remember that, folks. It kills. And to Alicia Rhodes from the YWCA, the supporting health and eliminating racism to support women and girls in the cessation efforts. Thank you for doing that. And for sharing how the usage of corporate interest continues to harm a community and that this is a social justice issue. I love how you shared that. Wow, raising awareness and putting info in the hands of the community members is huge. And from Truth Initiative, Amy Taylor, thank you for sharing the resources that are there, the school-based curriculum, as well as how to ditch the vape. What did you say? Ditch, D-I-T-C-H, vape, V-A-P-E, 88709. If you need to do that, go ahead and hit that up. Ditch Vape 88709. And from the National Association of Secondary School Principals, Greg Witcherit, understanding that school administrators understand the issue and are doing what they can to do to help was just super. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for saying specifically that hearing and masking flavors for the students you serve is the hook that keeps them coming. We know that's the hook. So the top takeaways here, join us with the campaign. Our nation continues to battle this COVID-19 pandemic. And we care about our young ones. We care about our youth as they return in person to school. We can't forget the devastation that tobacco use has and will continue to cause if we don't do something. So over the past few decades, we've seen some welcome decline in smoking rates. But guess what? Now to this new epidemic that's going on, we need to make sure that the policies are there that prevent young people from starting to smoke and to help tobacco users quit. Together, we can stop the tobacco industry and protect the health of our kids and communities, our youth and communities. There are a couple of things that I'd love for you to reach in with us for. So please reach out to us at partnerships@tfk.org for additional information. I promise we'll get back to you. Join our growing movement. I'm going to close now because I know we're kind of getting long-winded here as we're ending. But, I could have said it better. Sebastian, actually, his final words are words that I believe in daily. We all have to educate. We have to engage. And we have to empower. We've got to take action together. Until next time, in peace, unity, and advocacy, I leave you. So long.